are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
As we feared, Matt Nagy and the Chicago Bears don't seem ready to deviate from their mysterious, all-encompassing quarterback plan. And for now, the idea is to go back to Andy Dalton if and when he's ready to go, seemingly regardless of what Justin Fields does on the field. This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm an analyst for Pro Football Focus, and I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Today's episode brought to you by RockAuto.com. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit RockAuto.com and tell them Locked On sent you. On the show today, we will hear from Chicago Bears head coach Matt Nagy on the quarterback plan in spite of Justin Fields' performances and some of how he's broaching that topic and how they're going to decide which quarterback to play and all the different decision-making processes that go in there. We'll talk about what Nagy has learned about Justin Fields, what he's learned about himself, what he and Bill Lazor have sort of worked through and how they're seeing progress that way and how they were able to try and create something positive out of all the negative we saw against the Cleveland Browns. Then we'll wrap up with a look at the running back position with some unclear diagnoses here of what's going to happen with David Montgomery and maybe Damian Williams. Do the Bears look outside the organization potentially for a free agent to bring in? We'll go through some of the names to keep an eye on here as we get ready for the Raiders game coming up this weekend. But let's start with Justin Fields and this Bears quarterback decision, because it can be certainly the most important, but then also the most baffling and the most frustrating. And we talked about this on yesterday's podcast with Big Dave from Locked On Bulls about how he don't trust Matt Nagy to keep Justin Fields out there. The feeling was that is he really going to go back to Andy Dalton after Justin Fields had such a strong game against the Lions? We don't know if Dalton's going to be the guy against the Raiders, but as Matt Nagy keeps saying, it will depend almost solely at this point on Andy Dalton's health, not so much on Justin Fields' performances in these games, but when healthy, Andy Dalton is the Chicago Bears starter. And Matt Nagy hasn't always been super clear and concise on the topic, but he has stuck to the same position throughout, referencing this quarterback plan that he and Matt Nagy have, that he and Ryan Pace have.
Matt, a lot of people put themselves in your shoes and say, I was intrigued enough by Justin Fields, what he did, to let him ride the wave against the Raiders. Why do you not feel that way?
Again, this has been our plan, and Justin's grown, so we got to see where Andy's at with his health and all that, and then we'll I just appreciate and think that there's a lot of great things that he's done. There's a lot of things he can learn from, and Andy's also, I think it's also important to see that Andy's done a good job as well. It's unfortunate when he got hurt and moving the ball and the different things we were doing, but again, it's just I give credit to both of those quarterbacks because right now they're doing a great job.
Is there a level where Fields could kind of force your hand a little bit on that?
Well, I just think
reaches another level?
Again, what we're focused on is just how he's played these last two games, and he grew from the first game to the second game. And you look at really this plan that we've talked about the whole time is what we've discussed with everybody. We've discussed it with the quarterbacks. They understand it. They both know, including Nick, that they all need to be great in practice when they get their opportunities in the game. And that's all they're doing. Justin's been phenomenal with understanding that. I think it's great that he's had an opportunity. Unfortunately, with Andy's health, that happened. But right now, when you look at where Justin was in Cleveland 2 weeks ago versus where he just came from this past week, he's done a really good job. Is there room for improvement? Of course. Absolutely, there's room for improvement. But I think his confidence is a heck of a lot better right now than it probably was a week ago. And that's a credit to Justin for handling it the right way.
Matt Nagy has said all along that they're going to do what's best for the Chicago Bears. And presumably, especially given some of the heat underneath his seat as far as coaching for his job, potentially, that would mean putting the quarterback out there that's going to give the Chicago Bears the best chance to win the game. And presumably, if he's being genuine in the words that he says and isn't just saying one thing to appease Andy Dalton and then secretly planning how he's going to play Justin Fields instead, that he evidently feels that Andy Dalton at this stage gives them the best chance to win football games. We saw Dalton play well in the first drive, in the first quarter-ish of the game against the Bengals, Dalton's former team. They did orchestrate a nice touchdown scoring drive that looked a lot like what we had felt like this offense was supposed to look like. But then we've also seen Andy Dalton play very poorly against the Los Angeles Rams and occasional struggles there against the Bengals prior to his injuries. Compare that to Justin Fields, who, of course, had a very bad game against the Cleveland Browns in his first game, and then against the Lions, obviously looked a lot better and seemed to add that extra dynamic to this Bears passing game. And it's really hard to look at both of those guys' ups and downs and sit here and say with 100% certainty that Andy Dalton gives you the best chance to win right now. And even if you could say that, okay, in those two games for each one or game and a half, over that stretch, you could make an argument that maybe Dalton was better. I don't know that I agree with that, but say you believe that. Do you believe that that will remain the case for the rest of the season if you were to say keep starting Justin Fields and see that progression from week to week? It just doesn't seem to make much logical football sense on the field as to saying Andy Dalton is purely the better quarterback for this team. I think that the Lions game showed you closer to what the ceiling of this offense can be, or just how the ceiling of this offense is going to be so much higher with Justin Fields. Maybe the floor is a little bit higher with Andy Dalton, but you can achieve so much more. And it just doesn't make sense why they would go back to Andy Dalton with Justin Fields turning somewhat of a corner and showing you such a high level of play, especially when that can just make Justin Fields better and better. Unless you're trying to protect him for some reason from, the Raiders, 49ers, the Packers in these coming games, and Steelers after that. I mean, but he's not a quarterback that I think you need to protect. He's not mentally weak. He withstood the full, literally the dog pound, the full arsenal of the Cleveland Browns, a very good opponent in a very terrible performance. And Matt Nagy praised him for how he handled that adversity and how he remained calm, cool, and collected and learned from it and grew from it. It just seems like there's all the reasons in the world to keep starting Justin Fields, and very, very few reasons that have a lot of logic behind them to go back to Andy Dalton. And do we really trust that for the rest of the season, Dalton's going to keep playing at a high enough level to keep Fields on the bench? So then are you going to go back and forth between the two? I mean, it's part of this mystery quarterback plan that the Bears have all figured out. It's just hard to have much faith in that plan, especially as things change throughout the season. And that's really, I think, one of the big takeaways I got from Matt Nagy is how he continues to see learning and growth in himself and in this quarterback. We'll hear his thoughts and then try and apply that to the quarterback plan and maybe find something missing, something not quite connecting here between the words and the actions next on Locked On Bears. With the Las Vegas Raiders playing on Monday Night Football in a loss to the Chargers, we don't have updated odds yet for BetOnline.ag for Bears Raiders for this coming week, but they will be out soon, at least not at the time that I'm recording this podcast, waiting for the week 2 game to truly, wrap up and allow the odds makers to then judge where the Raiders might be. But hey, when you're ready to put some money down on this Bears week 5 matchup, BetOnline.ag is the number one place we trust and the number one place we recommend. They got updated odds, props, and contests for all the pro and college football action you love, plus basketball season right around the corner, baseball season, playoffs. You got hockey coming up, soccer, tennis, boxing, you name it, golf. They've got it at betonline.ag. Sign up today for a free account, and don't forget to enter our promo code Locked On to receive your free 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's promo code Locked On for even more money to play with at betonline.ag. Your online sportsbook experts. It's hard to feel super confident that the Bears quarterback experts truly know, not that they don't know what they're doing, but know what's the best deployment of the talent that they have at the quarterback position. That all throughout the moment they drafted Justin Fields after signing Andy Dalton, they've got a plan, right? They've worked through all the scenarios, is what Matt Nagy was saying. That they have, if things go this way or things go that way, they've kind of worked out a little bit of how they think this quarterback progression should go. Of course, they wanted to keep Fields on the bench for the entire season, presumably to do the Patrick Mahomes thing. And sure, that's a plan, but that plan changes when Andy Dalton gets hurt in week 2 and Justin Fields has to go in there and then start week 3 and start week 4. And all of a sudden the cat's out of the bag. The toothpaste is out of the tube and you can't just shove it back in there, as much as it does seem like Matt Nagy wants to try. But I'm struck by this idea. We talked about it, and I got a little angry about it last week after the Browns game when Matt Nagy said, hey, I'm learning too. I'm learning how to do this with the quarterback, and I'm learning about Justin Fields and how he's in the 4th year as a head coach, and he's still learning how to develop quarterbacks, even though that was the whole reason, or one of the main reasons the Bears had brought him in, for the offensive innovation and the quarterback development originally for Mitch, but apply that to Justin Fields now is why he's still here and why he is the head coach. And so it doesn't seem like he should be learning, but then if he is learning and there's new information coming in, it just doesn't seem to add up with exactly how they've operated this quarterback plan and how rigid they've been in it. But I think we also got a nice sense too from Nagy on how Justin Fields has learned and how he has developed. And then we can kind of plug those two things together and figure out where the heck the Bears seem to be missing the boat here. I just need to filibuster for a second as I get the video clip set up here for those watching on the YouTube channel. I'm going to edit this out of the podcast. I had the wrong clip set up and I was about to replay the same one that I had in there still. So bear with me here for a quick second as here we go. Here's Matt Nagy.
Matt, Justin said yesterday that in a weird way he was kind of glad that the Cleveland thing happened. I'm curious, as you've kind of learned about him over the months and specifically last week, how do you describe his ability to kind of handle struggle and hardship?
Yeah, he's one of the better ones I've been around with that. For 22 years old, to have that is rare. And it started with us Monday morning after that game, is being able to have discussions on why things went the way they did. Both of us, me as a head coach, him as a quarterback, us as a team, talking through it and saying, okay, how do we fix it? And again, I think I told you this last week, but in the beginning of the week, I think it was Wednesday, we were out at practice and just talking about what did happen and how we're going to try to turn that into a positive. And sometimes it might not be a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It might be a year when you look back. Who knows when it is, but you look back and you say, you know what, that really, it pulled us together and it helped us learn where we can get better. And again, like I said, for me, I learned a lot, not just about Justin, but our offense and everybody in general. And Justin was a part of that. And just that's going to be part of this process that he continues to grow with, And I thought yesterday him rebounding the way he did, standing in the pocket, making good throws. He had the one where we got the sack. But again, that's 2 times now that Justin's been playing quarterback where there's been a sack fumble, and out of nowhere here he comes to get the ball. That's huge to be able to. That's a big play that happened. That was a negative play that turned into an okay play.
Coach, regardless of things you can point to that he corrected from the prior game?
I would say, really probably there's some decision-making here or there throughout the game that you work with, whether it's you're working with your feet and the timing of matching up your feet with when you throw the ball and that decision-making. And he had some good ones in that Cleveland game too, where he made some good progressions. There was an RPO where he did a good job in Cleveland. Yesterday, he was able to, I thought he saw, when I go back and watch the tape, I thought he saw the coverages pretty good. They were really holding their shell. So or their cover 3 or 1. So they were 2 high safeties and at the snap coming down. That's hard as a quarterback, no matter who you are, when you hold your shell that long. And so I thought he did a good job of understanding that post-snap. And in Cleveland, it wasn't always like that every snap, but I felt like for all of us, there was more of looking at the offense and looking at what was going on with the offensive players. And yesterday there was a lot of looking at what's going on with the defense. And that's a positive step right there for him.
So great examples there, right, of sort of specific things that Justin Fields has made progress on and where the Bears have seen that growth in him, where he's learning, and some about how they're learning along at the same time. So isn't that then evidence that, like, hey, if he took that step from game 1 to game 2, not that he's always going to keep growing on that same trajectory throughout the whole season, but there's clear evidence that more playing time has equated to more development more quickly, and that continuing to give him playing time could continue to facilitate development more so than he was getting on the bench, first and foremost. But I think the thing that I'm stuck on a little bit with this quarterback plan, with the learning process and how they're all figuring it out as they go, it doesn't seem like it can be both at the same time. Either you've got this quarterback plan that has all the answers, not all the answers, but you know what I mean? That we've got contingencies and they've worked through the scenarios. On this one hand, they've got this quarterback plan and we're going to follow this plan because it's got us prepared for everything. And then also, we're still learning about Justin Fields and we're still figuring him out, and we're getting on the same page there, and we're learning from it as we go along, and we're getting better as a result. Well, so then shouldn't the plan change with the learning? That once you have new information, new understanding of your quarterback, of your offense, of how your players are in the best position to be successful, does that not then change the plan that you formulated before you seem to know all that information, right? How has the plan not changed then in a way to fit what we've all seen, and that is the development, the growth, and the importance of being out there and on the field in order to facilitate and create that growth and development in your young quarterback? Because again, that's what's best for the Chicago Bears long term. It seems to be what's best for the Chicago Bears short term, and it seems to be what gives Matt Nagy the best chance to win games, which is then the best chance for him to keep his job. If even if they don't make the playoffs, if they just have Justin Fields playing well, that's a pretty solid argument to ownership to say, hey, I had a rookie quarterback, we made it work, and we showed a lot of progress. Please let me keep my job, as opposed to, hey, we were mediocre with Andy Dalton, and we didn't really get to see enough of what that rookie quarterback could do, right? It's just, there's not a lot of logic. I mean, I'm really struggling to find the real football logic. The only thing, again, protecting Justin Fields from good opponents. The Browns kicked his butt a bit, and are you scared of Max Crosby and the Raiders get pass rush? I mean, then you need to do more as a coach to just prevent the injuries. I mean, it's kind of where I'm stuck. It's that, and this idea that, like, oh, well, this really bad loss against the Browns pulled us all together and brought us together. How many times do the Bears need to have bad losses and losing streaks to band them all together and get them to collaborate and play well? Like, it shouldn't take a game like that to bring everyone together, and it shouldn't take the quarterback playing well and new information to change the quarterback plan to figure out how to do this right. That's where, even when we see progress, the frustration still lingers there quite a bit with Matt Nagy. And especially now that there's some questions about how this running game is going to keep faring when David Montgomery is injured to some extent and Damian Williams is too. We'll take a look at what the Bears are going to do in the backfield, or what their potential options might be if they're going to have to spend some time without one or both of their top running backs. That's next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears brought to you by our friends at rockauto.com. They're a family business that have been serving auto parts customers online for over 20 years. They've got everything you could possibly need for your vehicle, from the complicated stuff, fuel pump assemblies and engine control modules, to the easy stuff, motor oil, tail lamps, new carpet, you name it, they've got it at rockauto.com. And their catalog is so easy to navigate. You just enter in your car's make and model, and then it pulls up all the different parts available for your vehicle, and you can sort by the brands, specifications, and prices you prefer. Those prices particularly important because a lot of the chain stores that sell parts, they'll have a different price tier if you're a professional mechanic versus a do-it-yourselfer like us. But rockauto.com's prices are the same for everybody. So don't spend up to twice as much for the same parts somewhere else. Check out rockauto.com, and while you're there and you check out, fill out the box that says, how did you hear about us? And fill in the words locked on. That way they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. So it seems like for now, the Bears have avoided the worst when it comes to David Montgomery's leg injury. Again, at the time that I'm recording this podcast, we don't have an official complete diagnosis. It sounds like it was hyperextended, but to what extent that hyperextension damaged the knee area or other portions of the leg. Certainly, I'm not a doctor and do not know the knee bones connected to the shin bone, the song. I mean, I don't even know the words to that. So my leg anatomy is very, very poor. But we keep continuing to get these sort of almost like vague injury updates from NFL insiders, Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport. They've all been good enough, but they've been a little bit short on specifics, right? I think Adam Schefter came out and said right away, like, the Bears don't suspect a torn ACL. All right, good, great, but that still doesn't really tell us what happened, what the timeline is. How do they know it's not a torn ACL without really knowing then what it is? I mean, I know there's ways to test that. Again, I'm not a medical professional by any means, but it also seemed to be pretty good news on Damian Williams as well. And there was a tweet from Ian Rappaport that I think pretty well summed things up. Damian Williams suffered a thigh bruise on Sunday and should be okay. He'd be the starter in the event David Montgomery misses a few games with his knee injury. Montgomery may miss some time, though the belief is the knee isn't serious. That's more information than just not a torn ACL, but it still doesn't really tell me, like, is that questionable for this upcoming game? Is that out this week and maybe back next week? Is that 2 to 3 weeks? It hasn't been enough for the Bears to put him on the injured reserve, but I don't know if they're waiting for MRI results or whatever other kind of tests you do on knees to figure out what exactly is wrong with him. It was a scary injury. He looked to be in pain. We feared the worst, and we can at least sort of set that aside. And then also, I don't want to overlook Damian Williams having a bruise in there. When you say thigh bruise, okay, I mean, you run into the end of a table and you get a thigh bruise at home, but clearly much more serious when it happens on a football field, and that's not a minor injury. But of course, as Ian Rappaport said, he should be okay, and he'll be the starter, assuming Dave Montgomery misses at least a few weeks. Was again in the event Montgomery misses a few weeks with his knee injury, is how Rappaport said, which is not reporting that he's going to miss a few weeks, but seems to be like maybe between the lines reading that that's maybe the expectation. And so I guess if it's a game or maybe two, I think you can get by with the Damian Williams in the starting lineup. I mean, he's never been a feature back for a whole season. I mean, 2019 with the Chiefs, the last season he played was his biggest year. He had 111 carries for 498 yards and 5 touchdowns, right? He's never even had 500 yards in a season. He's never really been that go-to bell cow every down kind of running back. Again, I think you can get by for a game or maybe two, but I think even if Montgomery's not out long term, I think they still got to bring in somebody just to have another body. With Tariq Cohen, of course, on the physically unable to perform list, he wouldn't be eligible to return until week 6. So he's not in that conversation for this Raiders game. Maybe beyond that, we can start to talk about throwing him back into the mix. But otherwise, it feels like you can't just roll with what Damian Williams and Khalil Herbert at this point on that running back depth chart. I mean, that's not necessarily a robust backfield, given especially how much you may want to run the ball for both Dalton and Fields, but especially if it is Justin Fields. And so I was trying to look around at maybe some outside players to keep an eye on, and it's, there's some names, but we're not going to see the big names. We're not going to see him sign Todd Gurley for short-term little thing. We're not going to see him sign Adrian Peterson or Frank Gore. They're old. Well, Gurley's not actually old, but runs like he's old. And then the other two are old. They're a little past their prime. They want to be maybe more feature backs and not just a fill-in injury replacement there. I just don't think that's a very realistic opportunity there. And once you take them out, the name recognition and the talent drops off a little bit. I mean, you got like Duke Johnson, former Brown, former Texan, really great receiver out of the backfield, but has never really been the go-to running back in the ground game. And then it's like, Darwin Thompson from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers practice squad. He was with the Chiefs for a couple of seasons, so could be more of a natural fit. He was their 6th-round pick, 2019. Not very experienced, and again, never been in that big role, but knows the offense from Kansas City and might be a more natural transition there. Or a couple of guys on the 49ers practice squad, Kerryon Johnson, the former Lions 2nd-round pick, and then Chris Thompson, who spent a long time with the Washington football team, sort of in that backfield rotation. I mean, if you're looking for a veteran guy with some experience that you feel like you could rely on a little bit, but the bar is really low for free agents. I mean, Kerryon Johnson and Chris Thompson have had some seasons under their belt and they're both very scheme versatile. They can do different zone and gap scheme runs. The Bears can mix things up and get creative a little bit more that way too. there's some kind of offerings there. And the other name that I scoured for is Kareth White, the former 7th-round pick by the Chicago Bears. I mean, Matt Nagy drafted him for a reason back then. I mean, maybe there's still some interest in what he might be able to do. But I think much more realistically, you look at the Bears' own practice squad, Ryan Nall. That's the first move. Promote Ryan Nall from the practice squad. Give him some carries. Line him up, run him hard up the middle. He's half fullback, half running back. Let him run hard. We've seen some nice plays by Ryan Nall, and he can fill in on special teams quite a bit as well. I would expect probably to see that move, even if it's like the game day promotion that they've done with some of the other guys on the practice squad. That would probably be the most expected move in the backfield for as long as David Montgomery's going to miss time. But I'd put in a call to Artavis Pierce, former undrafted free agent, Oregon State, just like Ryan Nall. We saw flashes of it. Was it last season where late in the year, garbage time kind of stuff, he came in and runs fast, runs hard. Again, you don't want to make that your every down back. You still have Damian Williams to kind of be the lead guy, but it feels like it's going to be a very committee-based thing. And again, 2 running backs does not make a committee. So whether that's Ryan Nall is that third or Artavis Pierce or both, I mean, you definitely can't run in this game with 2. And even 3, the Bears were cutting it a little bit tight, getting all 3 running backs involved. And now with an injury, you're exposed a little bit more. Tariq Cohen's going to be that 4th when he's healthy, but he's not. So I'm fully expecting to see Ryan Nall on this 53-man roster against the Raiders. Artavis Pierce probably not too far from that conversation as well, but we'll see. Keep an eye on any and all transactions the Bears might make in the backfield all week long right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure that you click that subscribe button. However you're listening or watching on the YouTube channel, subscribe, follow, click it. Keep up with all of our daily in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Because the podcast is free and available on all platforms, bringing it to you 5 days a week. Really appreciate everyone who makes us your first listen every single day, because I really do think it's the big reason why I do this podcast, right? Listening to Locked On Bears is supposed to make it so much easier for you to bear down.